September 7th, 1964. NBC, Monday night at the movies. Millions of Americans settled in for their evening entertainment. A film, popcorn, relaxation. Then, during a commercial break, something appeared that would change American politics forever. A little girl, maybe 3 years old, standing in a meadow, picking petals from a daisy, counting.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 6, 8, 9.
Then her voice stopped, replaced by a man's voice, cold, mechanical, military.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
A nuclear explosion erupted, filled the screen, a massive mushroom cloud consuming everything. Then, President Lyndon Johnson's voice.
These are the stakes. To make a world in which all of God's children can live, or to go into the dark. We must either love each other, or we must die.
60 seconds. That's all it took. If you want to understand how one television commercial, aired exactly once, weaponized fear, destroyed a presidential candidate without mentioning his name, and birthed the era of attack ads that still dominates politics today, hit that like button. Because this wasn't just an advertisement. This was psychological warfare, and it worked. 1964, the height of the Cold War. 2 years earlier, the Cuban Missile Crisis had brought the world to the brink of nuclear annihilation. For 13 days in October 1962, Americans lived with the terrifying possibility that Soviet missiles in Cuba could reach U.S. cities within minutes. President Kennedy and Soviet Premier Khrushchev had played nuclear chicken. And won. Barely. But the fear didn't disappear. It intensified. Nuclear attack drills in schools, fallout shelter signs on buildings, public service announcements about what to do if the sirens wailed, an entire generation growing up under the shadow of potential atomic death. This was the emotional landscape when Lyndon Johnson ran for re-election in 1964. And his opponent, Senator Barry Goldwater, had made nuclear weapons a central campaign issue. Barry Goldwater was a political conservative, author of The Conscience of a Conservative, champion of states' rights, opponent of the Civil Rights Act. But his most controversial positions involved nuclear policy. Goldwater opposed the Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. He suggested giving NATO commanders independent authority to use tactical nuclear weapons. He called the atomic bomb merely another weapon. Most infamously, he proposed using low-yield nuclear weapons to defoliate forests and destroy supply lines in Vietnam. When asked about nuclear war with the Soviet Union, Goldwater said America should not fear it. At the Republican National Convention in July 1964, accepting his party's nomination, Goldwater proclaimed, "Extremism in the defense of liberty is no vice. Moderation in the pursuit of justice is no virtue." The line was meant to defend conservative principles, but combined with his nuclear rhetoric, it sounded like extremism personified. Johnson's campaign saw an opening, a massive one. Johnson's team turned to Doyle Dane Bernbach, DDB, a revolutionary New York advertising agency. DDB had transformed commercial advertising in the early 1960s. Their Volkswagen Think Small campaign, their AVs were #2 ads, conceptual, minimal, modern, emotional. The Kennedy campaign had recruited DDB. When Johnson inherited the presidency, he inherited the agency. And DDB understood something fundamental. Voters don't need information, they need emotions. Traditional political ads were fact-based. Here's our candidate's record, here's our policy platform. Vote for us. Boring, ineffective, forgettable. DDB proposed something different. Attack ads, not rational arguments, visceral emotional responses, fear, terror, existential dread. Make voters feel that a Goldwater presidency meant nuclear holocaust. Make them see their children dying in atomic fire. Don't argue it, show it. DDB hired Tony Schwartz, an advertising pioneer famous for innovative sound work, to create the commercial. Schwartz understood psychological manipulation. He called his approach a Rorschach test on the American public. The ad didn't need to explicitly connect Goldwater to nuclear war. The audience would make that connection themselves. The concept was simple: juxtapose innocence with annihilation. They filmed 3-year-old actress Monique Corzilius in a Manhattan park, not a rural field, urban setting masked as pastoral. She picks petals from a flower, not even a daisy. It was a black-eyed Susan. But Daisy Girl sounded better. She counts, incorrectly, childlike, authentic. 1, 2, 3. Then the camera zooms into her pupil. The shot was inspired by François Truffaut's film The 400 Blows, which ends with a freeze frame on a child's face, suggesting death. As the camera zooms, the girl's voice fades, replaced by a military countdown. 10, 9, 8. The nuclear explosion fills the screen. Actual footage from atomic tests. Then Johnson's voice, solemn, presidential. These are the stakes. The last line, "We must either love each other or we must die," came from W. H. Auden's poem September 1, 1939, written at the onset of World War II. Everything calculated, every second, every sound, every visual, maximum emotional impact. September 7, 1964. The ad aired once, during NBC's Monday Night at the Movies. One network, one time, paid placement. Approximately 50 million viewers saw it that night. The reaction was immediate, explosive. The Goldwater campaign was outraged. Republican National Committee Chairman Dean Birch called it a horror-type commercial designed to arouse basic emotions. Goldwater himself said, "The homes of America are horrified, and the intelligence of Americans is insulted by weird television advertising." Democratic operatives worried too. Even Johnson's Secretary of Labor expressed concern. Johnson himself admitted the ad may have gone overboard. The Johnson campaign pulled the ad, announced it would not air again. But here's the genius. They didn't need to air it again. Every major network replayed the ad, in its entirety, on news broadcasts, commentary programs, political analysis shows. Why? Because it was news, controversial, shocking, unprecedented. Time magazine put the Daisy Girl on its cover. Network anchors discussed it, pundits analyzed it, editorial boards wrote about it. The ad that aired once as a paid commercial was shown dozens of times as free media coverage. Estimated total viewership, 100 million people, nearly half the U.S. population. DDB had weaponized the news cycle, turned controversy into publicity, made the ad itself the story. Robert Mann, author of Daisy Petals and Mushroom Clouds, later said, "What one of the brilliant aspects of the Daisy Girl spot was they never mentioned Barry Goldwater, never showed his image because they didn't need to." The audience already had a lot of information on Goldwater's reckless positions. They were trying to use what the voters already knew. Goldwater had branded himself an extremist, advocated nuclear weapons in Vietnam, opposed arms control. The Daisy ad didn't create that image, it cemented it in concrete. Did the ad win the election for Johnson? Probably not. Johnson was already leading by double digits. Goldwater's campaign was struggling. The assassination of JFK still generated enormous sympathy for Johnson, but the ad accomplished something bigger. It preempted any Goldwater comeback. Polls didn't shift dramatically after September 7th, but they didn't need to. Goldwater's image was destroyed, permanently. On November 3rd, 1964, Americans went to the polls. Johnson won in a landslide, 486 electoral votes to 52, over 15 million more popular votes than Goldwater, one of the biggest victories in U.S. presidential history. The Daisy ad didn't just help Johnson win, it transformed political advertising forever. Before 1964, campaign ads were positive, policy-focused, fact-based. After Daisy, everything changed. Negative ads became standard. Attack ads proliferated. Emotional manipulation replaced rational argument. Fear became the most powerful weapon in a political arsenal. 1968, Hubert Humphrey attacked Richard Nixon with similar tactics. 1972, Richard Nixon's team created attack ads against George McGovern.
President Nixon doesn't believe we should play games with our national security. He believes in a strong America.
1988, George H.W. Bush's Willie Horton ad. 2004, Swift Boat veterans attack ads against John Kerry. 2016, attack ads dominate both parties. Every single one traces its lineage back to September 7, 1964, to a little girl in a meadow, to 60 seconds of nuclear terror. Was the Daisy ad fair? Goldwater supporters called it dishonest, manipulative, fear-mongering. But was it inaccurate? Goldwater did advocate using nuclear weapons in Vietnam. He did oppose arms control. He did call extremism a virtue. The ad didn't lie. It just showed the logical conclusion of Goldwater's policies. A child, a bomb, annihilation. Johnson's team believed the stakes were exactly that high, that Goldwater's nuclear positions genuinely threatened humanity. Were they manipulating voters or warning them? That's the question that still haunts American politics. Because every attack since 1964 uses the same playbook. Show the worst-case scenario. Make it visceral. Make it terrifying. Don't argue. Horrify. If this investigation made you see modern political advertising in a new light, hit that like button. Share with anyone who wonders why campaigns are so negative. Subscribe for more deep dives into the moments that changed American politics. Tell us, was the Daisy ad genius or unethical? Would you vote for someone using these tactics today? Because 60 years later, we're still living in the world LBJ and DDB created, where fear wins elections, where emotion beats reason, where a little girl counting petals can destroy a presidential campaign. Thank you for watching, and remember, when you see a political attack ad, you're watching the legacy of September 7, 1964.